webinar, The Business Value of Running SAP Solutions on the AWS Cloud. Our presenters are Peter Mauel, AWS Global Alliance Leader, and Bill Timm, AWS Partner Program. Peter and Bill, you have the floor.
Great. Thank you, Carrie. Welcome, everyone. My name is Peter Mauel. I am the AWS Global Alliance Leader and responsible for the SAP business on AWS. We appreciate you spending an hour of your time with us today. We know everybody has very busy schedules. So with no further ado, let me go over the agenda that we'll cover today. We do some brief introductions. I'll give you a brief overview of AWS and our core value proposition. We'll talk about the AWS SAP partnership and where we've been with SAP, where we're going with SAP. We'll talk about the various different instances and workloads of SAP that you can run on AWS. We'll share some customer case studies and we'll move forward on to our next steps. So first of all, who is AWS? So Amazon Web Services is a division of Amazon Corporate. We're focused on the infrastructure. We are the leader in cloud computing, and we were born out of Amazon Retail. We have hundreds of thousands of customers in over 190 countries around the world. When you look at the core services that we provide a core set of services around compute, storage, and database, backed by network, and of course on the AWS global infrastructure. On top of our core compute and storage services, we offer a full set of deployment and administration services and application services, enabling our customers to run their applications and their businesses on the AWS Cloud. When you look at the global infrastructure that we have 9 regions across the globe. Here you can see a map of them, 25 availability zones and 38 edge locations. That provides a lot of failover and backup and disaster recovery options for our customers in deploying their solutions on the AWS Cloud. Typical use cases and how customers use the AWS really fit into a few key areas. The first one is where they want to augment on-premise resources, where they have existing data centers, but then they have spikes in demand. So they want to be able to leverage something very elastic without having to go through procurement cycles of bringing in on-premise hardware on site. That's one of the main use cases. Another use case is when they're looking at migrating existing applications and data onto the cloud. This can be driven by events such as mergers and acquisitions, or potentially events that happen in the environment, where data centers go down and companies are requiring to make backups. A lot of companies have really started their entire businesses in terms of building on Amazon Web Services. A lot of startups, rather than go to the investment of building up huge racks of servers and data centers, have decided to leverage the elasticity of building out applications on the AWS Cloud. This really enables them, when they reach peak demand or if they launch a product and they get multiple million web hits, that their infrastructure won't go down, it will continue to grow, leveraging the elasticity that we provide from our cloud. One of the interesting things about Amazon Web Services in 2013 is that every day we are adding the same amount of capacity in our data centers as the same amount of capacity that we use to run Amazon as a separate entity in 2003. That is a staggering factoid, and it really enables our customers to have confidence in the fact that we have the scalability to meet their needs as they grow their businesses. Customers large and small are using the Amazon Cloud. They're running various elements of the entire business. They could be running websites, they're running mission-critical applications such as SAP, but we cross all industries, across all continents, companies from small startups to large global 100 companies. We also have a large footprint in both government agencies and educational institutions worldwide, and this is continuing to grow. The use cases for AWS Cloud are ranging from both commercial enterprises as well as on the government and public sector side. One of the key areas and reasons for this is that we have architected our cloud for security. So as a customer, you don't have to worry about the security requirements. We're SOX compliant, ISO, In the US here, we support ITAR, FIPS, FISMA, even the Motion Picture of America requirements from a security standpoint. That's primarily because we have existing customers in that industry. So one of the key values that customers drive from us is they don't have to worry about these security requirements because we are already certified for these areas. And that gives our customers great comfort, in fact, when they're dealing with data, both personal data and public data with their customers, that their data will be protected when leveraging our cloud. Where we've been heading as a business is really quite dramatic. We are in a position right now that we are doing two things very well that nobody else is doing, and that is both innovation and scale. So we are constantly adding new services to our AWS Cloud, adding new features and functions, making it easier and easier to use, and giving our customers the ability to have that flexibility. Also, as I mentioned earlier, we are scaling on a rapid pace. As I mentioned, we're adding the same capacity on a daily basis as we were basically using to run Amazon retail back in 2003. When you look at the latest Gartner Magic Quadrant over the last three, what you will see here is that Amazon Web Services has always been in the upper right-hand quadrant where you want to be, but in the last one, as you'll see, the gap between us and the competition is accelerating. In fact, in the last readout, the last quadrant, Gartner made the comment that we have more capacity than all the other competitors combined in delivering services to our customers. And that's really enabling us to see exponential growth, not just across our smaller startup customers, but also across our large enterprise customers, and especially those running SAP, but that's very, very important. So when you look at how SAP customers are running AWS, it really fits into also three different areas. They're running us for production support systems, test and development, and we'll have more on that later. Non-production systems, training, proof of concepts, prototypes, and then of course on the production systems themselves. And the entry points can be any of these three or all the above. I'll cover some of these use cases in a little bit more detail. Right now, what I'd quickly like to cover is a brief overview of our relationship with SAP, and where we've been, what we have, and I'll also discuss a little bit about where we're going. So SAP has been a customer of AWS since 2008. SAP itself leverages our cloud quite significantly. They run pilots and proof of concepts for their customers on us. They use our platform internally for development, and they're also using it to support some of the business processes that support things like email, some of their web entities, etc., etc. We have been a global technology partner with SAP now since 2008. There's only 30 global technology partners around the globe, and it's a very important distinction in terms of our capabilities to be able to work with SAP, both from a move forward, go-to-market and development perspective, and also from a delivery of new capabilities that SAP brings out into the marketplace to leverage the capabilities of our AWS Cloud. We focused over the initial piece of our relationship with SAP on making sure that we had the right product certified so our customers could be able to deploy what they wanted and when they wanted on our cloud. So we've certified, we have all the key SAP products. On the ERP side, we have full support for Business Suite, Business All-in-One for typically the mid-market companies and verticalized solutions, the rapid deployment solutions, the business objects and EPM suites for SAP. Afaria. Afaria is a very interesting one for us. If you go to sapafaria.com, SAP is offering a 30-day free trial of Afaria. That solution is running on the AWS Cloud, and you will see it's branded on that site, powered by AWS. Sybase and the Unwire platform, and then of course Business One. So we really crossed the full portfolio of SAP products. We're certified on many of the key databases, IBM, SQL Server, Sybase ASE. And on the operating system side, you can see here it's Windows and Linux, SUSE Linux and Red Hat. The executives at SAP are very excited about our relationship and also about the value that we are delivering to SAP customers, especially in driving agility and flexibility into their infrastructures to really enable them to take advantage of the rich functionality that exists within SAP. one of the challenges that I've seen in my career with SAP is the challenge from a lot of companies of being able to leverage all the functionality that exists in such a rich application. One of the advantages that we'll share with you today is by leveraging the AWS Cloud, the ability to rapidly deploy new projects rapidly enables our customers to deploy that new functionality to drive differentiation, agility into the business that they're offering, and really focus on those key areas. So a relationship with SAP is also progressing to a stage where you'll see us all over the SAP website and also on our own website. Here's some screenshots. They're a little bit small and hard to read. But the first one on the left is on the SAP HANA 1 homepage. This is an offering that SAP has. It's powered by AWS. Also, next to that is the SAP HANA 1 on the AWS Marketplace. Here, you're able to basically go on and try HANA on our Marketplace. It's a limited version of HANA in terms of the memory size, only 60 gigs. But you're able to leverage it for 99 cents a minute plus just over $2 per hour for the infrastructure. Another key thing of that is you can get up and running in HANA in just 8 minutes. And yes, I said that, just 8 minutes. It's pretty compelling. So as our relationship grows, we expect to see more and more this relationship, as was mentioned in one of the prior quotes, of world-class business software running on a world-class cloud. And we expect as we continue with our relationship with SAP, you'll see many, many more co-branded offerings that are delivering value into the SAP and the AWS customer base. Studies have shown that when it comes to TCO, which is very important, the AWS Cloud has significant advantages over on-premise hardware. A study was done by a company called VMS, which has a benchmark of over 2,500 SAP deployments. A German-based company. They did a study of deploying SAP on the AWS Cloud versus deploying on-premise. What they found was that it was up to a 71% cost saving in deploying on the AWS Cloud. And that's just in cost alone. That does not include the other benefits of moving from a CapEx to an OpEx model, the agility that you get from that, moving away from hardware refreshes, moving away from dealing with some of the security requirements that we mentioned earlier and the audits that are attached to that, because we take care of all those. This is really compelling. This study is available on our website. It's the VMS AWS TCO study. It's well worth a read if you're interested in moving some of your SAP workloads to the cloud. This slide shows that study in a little bit more detail, and it shows the differences depending on the size of the ERP implementation of the percentage of savings that we were able to impact from an AWS perspective. For large ERP, it was 62%, and for an all-in-one application, it was 71%. Once again, these are compelling numbers when you look at the cost of deploying and the cost of the infrastructure that's required to support SAP implementations, whether it's in the test environment, the development environment, the production environment, or the non-production environment. Let's now talk about the various use cases and running SAP on AWS. First of all, let's kind of highlight what are the values and why do companies move their AWS instances over to the AWS Cloud. The first one that we've just been talking about is lower overall cost. Cost is clearly important. The amount of dollars spent on infrastructure and hard iron becomes significant. And being able to leverage that and move that onto a cloud model where you can actually consume the resources as you want them is very compelling. The nice thing about the AWS Cloud is that you can spin up instances of our compute power when you need them, turn them off when you don't need them. That enables you to leverage our cloud like a utility. That can provide significant overall cost savings. Another key component is when you're looking at potentially a new acquisition and you're looking at a new project, and you're looking at the sizing of the infrastructure to support that. The ability to move from a CapEx model into an operations model where you don't have to capitalize the expense of the infrastructure, move it to an operations model where you pay for it as you go, is very compelling in terms of being able to manage cash flow for enterprises. Agility and speed, this is probably the number one value proposition that we see from SAP customers. The ability to rapidly deploy new deployments. the ability to quickly go and test out and develop new functionality that's going to drive value for the business, enabling the organization to focus on the core things that differentiate it from a product and customer and operational perspective, leveraging that rich value of SAP is really where we've seen a huge uptake in the adoption from SAP customers onto the AWS Cloud. Moving away from hardware refresh cycles, anybody who's been managing data centers knows that can be a significant headache. And then having the elasticity and flexible capacity, being able to deal with new product launches, peak demands, divestitures, mergers and acquisitions, all things that may require new instances of SAP to be spun up very quickly. To have that elastic capability and that flexibility with the AWS Cloud really drives a tremendous amount of value for our SAP customers. And as I mentioned, all these things tend to lead to a shift of a focus less on the IT infrastructure, but more on leveraging the SAP application to drive innovation, agility, and differentiation into the core business. One of the things that we see a lot with some of our customers, and the customer I talked to the other day, was they were discussing on a new project. It was going to take them anywhere from 6 weeks to about 6 months to get the infrastructure provisioned. When they started to look at the AWS Cloud, they realized that they were able to provision that infrastructure in minutes and hours as opposed to weeks and months. That's a very, very compelling value. And these factors shift into the C-level suite too. From a CFO perspective, we hear this all the time. They like the OpEx model, enables them to manage cash flow, reduce profits from a tax capability. From a CEO perspective, it's all about driving the business and leveraging the mission-critical assets of a company, and also the underlying support of those business processes and the drivers of those business processes and enabling technology such as SAP to drive differentiation, reduce cost, and drive value to the end customer from being able to quickly enable those projects that they have on the burner. And from a CIO perspective, the ability to move from being a service provider to a service broker and quickly deliver ROI is very, very compelling. So when you look at the various use cases, in the production workloads, we have several customers that really adopt different use cases when they run their SAP applications on AWS. We've had some companies that have started in the development and their test environments. Others have moved straight to production, and then even others have just started with disaster recovery. The nice thing about the AWS Cloud is that you can basically leverage anywhere on this matrix here. You can start off with test and dev. We have several large enterprise customers that have started off by developing development and test environments, and quite quickly seen the agility and the elasticity of the cloud, and from there move very, very quickly to deployment of more and more development instances, and it's almost become a viral effect where they eventually move down into production. We've had several customers that have moved their entire landscapes in one shot directly over to the AWS Cloud. Oftentimes we've seen that in these use cases in some mid-market companies, for example, where they're running lean and mean from an IT infrastructure perspective, or don't have the capability to build a data center, or want to have the issues that come with managing a data center, and are able to move directly onto the AWS Cloud. So the flexibility and the on-ramps that you have for this is very compelling. It enables customers to start consuming AWS resources in as little as you want or as much as you want. On a non-production workload side, training. Training is very important. I was on the call today with a very large life science pharmaceutical company that they're going their first on-road to the AWS Cloud with SAP is going to be on the training environment, where they don't want to go through the process of making a significant investment for peak training demand in a lot of servers and the infrastructure. In that particular case, what they want to do is be able to leverage the elasticity of the AWS Cloud to move their training instances onto our cloud, turn them on when they need them, and turn them off when they don't. That's going to create a significant amount of cost savings. And this is going to be the first step in a roadmap for this large company to move their entire SAP landscape onto the AWS Cloud. Sandboxing and prototyping projects, as I mentioned earlier, the ability to quickly deliver new functionality One CIO told me recently that they estimated they had about a 10-year backlog of SAP projects because of the time it takes to provision, go through the procurement cycles, to get hardware on site, get those environments up and running, and then start to do the projects. The ability to reduce that significantly drives the ability to drive value into the business, as well as reduce the cost and reduce that backlog quite substantially. And then archiving, also known as mothballing. A lot of companies run old instances of SAP that are fully run and fully supported as if they were production, just because in some case an audit may require some type of detail to come from those old systems. The question becomes, why keep those old systems up and running on-premise when you can quite quickly leverage and put those onto the AWS Cloud? If you have the need for an audit, or if you have the need to access those systems, turn on those instances when you need them and turn them off when you don't. Once again, the ability to have that flexibility is very, very compelling. All these reasons have been driving adoption to the AWS Cloud. What we've seen recently is, especially in 2013, is a very, very significant increase across large and small companies in all parts of the world in terms of the adoption of SAP workloads at AWS. So when you look at the layers that are supported here on AWS, it's important to keep in mind the types of services that need to be managed when you leverage our cloud. Essentially what we're providing is really the physical infrastructure and the support of physical infrastructure up to the hypervisor. On top of that, there's a requirement to have managed services. Somebody managing the OS administration, the patching, the security, the backup and recovery. But then, of course, on top of that, you have your traditional functional and technical layers, your basis layer support for SAP. Now, some companies, especially the large companies that are running SAP on AWS, are unable to provide these top 4 boxes themselves. Some will leverage a third party, but it's important when you look at bringing your SAP workloads onto the AWS Cloud that we look at addressing this on the onboarding process. Whether you want to do this yourselves or whether you want to actually leverage a third party. And we're happy to put you in touch with many of the third parties that we work with in order to do that. The architectures that are supported, as I mentioned earlier, we have many customers that are leveraging the AWS Cloud in what we would call a hybrid SAP deployment, where the production components of SAP are on-premise, but the development and the QAS systems, the test and dev systems, are basically on the AWS Cloud. This is typically done where companies initially start to adopt the AWS Cloud, where they're first starting to get used to our capabilities. And then very quickly what happens here is all these components on the left, on the production side, your ECC 6.0 versions, your BW, your SRMs, all start to move onto the cloud. Once again, what this is really highlighting is the fact that you have a great flexibility in terms of how you can deploy on us. It's not an all or nothing approach. You can consume as much as you want or as little as you want and still reap the value proposition and the benefits of the agility, the elasticity, and the innovation that we've discussed earlier. The connectivity into our cloud is typically via VPN or Direct Connect, which is a much more robust connection. And part of that can really be decided by what kind of workloads and how you want to do that, and also based on your own networking and your own infrastructure. So typically what we do with customers when we sit down with them is we talk through a roadmap, we talk through the approaches, we talk through the value, we talk through where the quick wins are, and we'll work with you to basically come up with the right architecture that supports your needs in driving the requirements that you have to drive your business. And here we go. This is the example of the full deployment that many customers have had, where essentially they run their entire environments of SAP on our cloud. We also have customers that are not running just their SAP environments on our cloud, but their complete environments on our cloud, relying on AWS as the infrastructure to drive their business in a high availability, a very secure mode. So just to conclude on this is a little bit more detail in terms of looking at those services. So as I mentioned earlier, it's very possible there's 2 real modes that most of our companies, our customers take in terms of driving how they're going to deploy onto the AWS Cloud. A self-managed mode where they basically do all the SAP functional and basis support and then manage their own infrastructure services, or they'll look at working with a fully managed hosting partner, of which you may either have one today, or we're happy to work with you in identifying one, We have several working with us today that provide everything from full implementation services through to SAP hosting services through to the managed services. By the end of the day, these green areas and gray areas that you see on these screens, these are areas and capabilities that we do not provide from an SAP perspective. What we focus on here is purely the infrastructure side up to the hypervisor to enable you to run your SAP applications. So we look at the licensing model. Our licensing model is same just as normal infrastructure that you would buy and put on premises. You bring your own license, you come onto the AWS website, you get onto our console and you spin up an instance and you basically deploy your license. There's no different here. We also have a few versions where you can actually leverage SAP licenses directly on the AWS marketplace. One I mentioned earlier was the HANA 1, where you can start deploying HANA and using it up to 60 gigs for 99 cents an hour. We also have versions with business objects with 5 user licenses, and also trial versions of Afaria, the site-based Amaya platform, and also HANA 1 Developer Edition, and some others as well, moving on to the NetWeaver platform. When you look at AWS, there's a few different models that we have for pricing. The two main ones leveraged for SAP customers are on-demand pricing, which is a pay-as-you-go model. You essentially pay by the hour for as much computing power as you need. Typically, we see customers using this for training instances, testing instances, demo instances, proof of concepts. Typically, things that may not be leveraged or required 7x24 with 100% uptime. These are typically projects that may have cyclical natures, or they may have defined time points. So, from a cost-effective perspective, it enables customers to turn these on when they need them and turn them off. When you get into the production side, we move into more the reserved instance pricing model. This is a model where you typically pay a one-time fee up front, but you get a lower per hour cost. And this is really used for the production instances where SAP customers are running in production on the AWS Cloud. And these reserved instances are typically delivered on a 1- and 3-year term. We have other pricing models. We have a spot pricing model, which is more of a bid model. But typically for applications like SAP, these are the two main pricing models that our customers use when coming onto the AWS Cloud. In the second part of our webinar series, where we talk about deploying on the AWS Cloud and the how-to, we'll be going into some of these pricing models in more detail and showing you how you can look at the pricing models, how you can select, and how you can look at defining the optimal configuration to enable your SAP applications. One example that I wanted to show you quite quickly is, here's a typical example of a mid-sized test and development system that we ran through the AWS pricing model on our website. One interesting thing you can see here, it says 4 cores with 15 gigs of memory, persistent storage of 200 gigs, a backup of 300 gigabytes. When you look at the cost of this, you have a total monthly recurring cost of under $200. That's compelling. And the nice thing about the instances with AWS is that you can turn this on automatically. You could get on today, put this configuration in, and turn on and have this instance up and running in minutes. And then from there, start your development work on SAP in hours. And that's very, very compelling. We have several partners, as I mentioned. We have information on our partners. You can go on to the amazon.com/AWS/SAP website. And on there, on our APN, our Amazon Partner Network, you'll see a list of the partners that we support. We work with many of the global systems integrators, most notably Capgemini, as well as other core managed services providers, companies like Idasoft. We work with Petrera. All these companies are able to provide a full set of services to support you in onboarding your on-premise SAP instances onto the AWS platform. They provide everything from full implementation services through architectural services, and then onto the managed services. This is flexibility. This gives you the ability to leverage partners where you need to or not. We have many customers that basically manage all their own components, and some that work very closely with our partner community. And our partner community is also offering now through our AWS on our website the the ability to also try and leverage some existing SAP applications before you go and buy them. You can go onto the SAP Test Drive program, which is on AWS, and look at the ability to quickly go and try SAP applications on an AWS environment before you go and buy them. We've spoken about the HANA 1 component, but also the SAP Afaria trial. This is also offered through SAP. If you go onto the Amazon website, you'll be driven directly to a link on the sapafaria.com, where you can run a 30-day free trial of Afaria on AWS and provision the instance in minutes. It's really unheard of, very compelling to leverage and try out this functionality. Let's take a look at some of the use cases. I've talked a lot about how companies actually leverage the AWS Cloud, whether they're using it for a production or non-production instance. But let's look at some real-life case studies. One example here is one of our partners and also one of our customers, Capgemini. Capgemini realized they had a significant amount of infrastructure they were using to manage training environments. What they wanted to do was dramatically reduce the cost of both managing and the cost of doing the refreshes on those environments. They moved their entire training landscape onto the AWS Cloud. They were able to do this very, very quickly, 35 plus systems, and able to realize a dramatic cost reduction, up to 36%. So here's an example of one of those non-production environments that was moved onto the AWS Cloud. Another example here is Merrifield. This is a SAP All-in-One customer. In this particular case, Merrifield really had a very small IT team, did not want to go and build the data center services to run their SAP environment. They were really looking for an outsourcing partner, but they wanted to have the leverage and the flexibility and the elasticity of the world's number one cloud. And they came to AWS, realized that they could very quickly migrate their whole environment, test, dev, production, onto the AWS Cloud, and do it in a very, very efficient manner, and also significantly reduce their deployment time because they did not have to go through the process of building infrastructure to support a data center, procuring servers, provisioning the servers, and getting all those things online. They're very, very rapidly able to articulate and build their environment on AWS in days to manage their entire infrastructure from end to end. Very, very compelling. Another example here is a company that's actually built a business leveraging business objects, CMBI, onto the AWS Cloud. This is a startup company that provides a lot of analytics to emergency rooms in hospitals. And what they wanted to do was very rapidly build a business, but did not want to incur the cost because they haven't proved out their business model of building out the infrastructure. So they basically put their business objects onto the AWS Cloud, were able to build out their analytical models, provide the services, bring on 12 to 14 hospitals very, very quickly, and not worried about planning or sizing for peak demand, knowing that as their business took off, they had the elasticity of leveraging AWS Cloud to enable that. So right now, here's already 3 different cases. This is a startup case, we've seen a mid-sized company case, and we've also seen the case of a non-production system. Let's move on to another one. Here's an example of a SAP hybrid deployment AWS. This is a Business Suite customer. This is Lionsgate, the film company. In this particular case, they were looking to really start to build innovation and reduce the deployment cycles for development projects on AWS of delivering SAP functionality to the end business. So they moved their entire development and test environments over to the AWS Cloud, and right now they're in the process of moving their production instance onto the AWS Cloud. So here's once again an example of a very large enterprise customer that essentially started with AWS on the test and dev environment, and then very quickly realized the value of that and decided to start moving their entire SAP infrastructure onto our cloud. And last but not least, here's an example of a disaster recovery scenario. In this particular case, from an audit, company realized that they really did not have a good disaster recovery environment, but did not want to go out and build the infrastructure and procure the servers to provide that. They realized that they could basically do this very, very quickly in very short order and do it on the AWS Cloud and not have to worry about environmental issues like being in a flood zone or being in a zone that may be subject to some kind of environmental disaster. So these are all examples of customers that have basically leveraged the various different use cases. And this is really just the tip of the iceberg. We have thousands of SAP customers running some versions of SAP on our cloud today. So let's talk about some next steps here. So first of all the information I provided to you, you can find white papers on our website, aws.amazon.com/SAP. You can find white papers, you can find the VMS TCO customer TCO success story, showing you the savings from 60% to 71% of total infrastructure services. On here you can also read the SAP notes about the various applications that we support. And also you can also contact us directly at AWS SAP. And also you can see my own personal email here. And we'll be happy to get back to you and answer any questions that you may have in being able to drive the innovation and the agility that you want from leveraging AWS for your SAP infrastructure. Also, some of the other key things I mentioned earlier, moving forward here, we'll be delivering a bunch of seminars in terms of how you can now implement SAP solutions on the AWS Cloud, how you look at architecting, how you look at getting on to the various tools that we have to offer, and how you can quite quickly set up and provision instances and size them appropriately to run your SAP infrastructure. We'll be sending out a link to these after the webinar today. And as you can see, we're running a whole bunch of these over the next several weeks here. So please do take advantage of that. We're here to support you. We're here to help you. And then on another note, many of you will be attending many events around the world coming up, importantly with SAP. We have 4 such events that we're doing with SAP coming up over the next several months. We are gold sponsors here of the 3 SAP Tech Eds coming up in Las Vegas, October 21st to the 25th, Amsterdam, November 5th to the 7th, and SAP Tech Ed in Bangalore. We look forward to seeing you. If you're attending, please come by and come and see us. We'll be happy to answer any questions for you, show you some live demos of how you can leverage our AWS Cloud, and any questions you have on our value proposition, we'd be happy to answer. Also, we have our own conference, the AWS reInvent in Las Vegas in November the 12th to 15th. SAP will be a gold sponsor there. So if any of you on the call are planning on coming to our reInvent conference and have any questions in terms of SAP applications and the capabilities they have running on our cloud, you'll be able to get those answered directly from AWS and also from our SAP partners and SAP who will be at the event. So on that note, that concludes our presentation for today, and we will now take a look at the Q&A. Okay, Bill, are you on the call?
Yes, I am here.
Okay, good. Would you like to take us through the Q&A, or I'll take a couple of them? I'll take a first one here, Bill, and I'll pass over to you. Okay?
Sure.
One of the questions we had, will a 256 gig version of HANA be available soon? Very good questions. We get lots of questions from our SAP customers asking us about when we have bigger instances of HANA available. Right now we're working very closely with SAP on that. We expect to have bigger instances available soon. Unfortunately, I cannot commit to an exact date yet, but please do check with us.
One of the questions, Peter, is how many SAPs does your system support? So we have run the standard SAP sales and distribution benchmark on a few of our different instance types, both the 2-tier and 3-tier. The maximum 3-tier benchmark currently on our Elastic Compute Cloud is 90,000 SAPs. Another question was, is SAP BPC NetWeaver certified to run on EC2 as well as HANA 1, yes, BPC, the NetWeaver version is certified, and with the HANA 1 Premium Edition, it can be run on top of HANA 1 on AWS also.
Great, thank you. I'll take a question here, Bill. Do you consider that running such a big ERP like SAP in the cloud could lack stability and data security? One of the things I mentioned earlier in our presentation is all the various compliance audits and compliant agencies that we're compliant with. What that gives to our customers is a great degree of comfort in terms of the security of their data. And as we talked about, we have many, many large enterprise customers that rely completely on the AWS Cloud to support their SAP environments and in a high availability mode.
Another question, how do you manage SLAs regarding SAP solutions? So we, AWS, manage the physical infrastructure up to the hypervisor, as Peter mentioned earlier. We provide an SLA at the infrastructure level. We have many SAP partners that can provide a fully managed service on top of AWS for SAP solutions, and those partners can provide an SLA for the SAP solution. Another question was, what are customers using to back up SAP data? Pretty much most of the existing either native database backup tools or third-party backup tools can be run on AWS. So depending on the system type and the tolerance for either an online or offline backup would determine which backup tool to use. But like with most everything on AWS, you have multiple options depending on the requirements and the system.
Okay, I see another question here. How many companies are running SAP on AWS, and what size are the customers? Do you have a mix of production versus other? So we have customers ranging all across the gamut, from startups to large commercial companies and also large public sector organizations. And they're running the full gamut of full production systems to full non-production systems. Whilst I can't disclose an exact number, it's safe to say that the number of entities that are running some type of workload, SAP workload on AWS, runs into the thousands.
Another question, would you say that most customers are using Direct Connect? This is dependent on the customer and what they're using AWS for. Most customers start with the VPC, they start with just a VPN connection, and then depending on their requirements and what they're using AWS for, might then upgrade to the Direct Connect connection, which is using a private connection instead of a VPN, which then provides more consistent bandwidth and lower latency. So it's very dependent on the customer and their requirements, but what's nice is you can start with a VPN, which is very easy to get set up, and then if needed, go ahead and move to the Direct Connect.
All right, let's see. Are there any more questions out there?
Okay, I think we're going to go ahead and wrap things up. I'd like to extend a special thanks to our presenter, Peter, and to Bill for helping with the questions. Thank you both very much, and thanks everyone for attending.